As you consider the cloud, stages of adoption can ground a lot of your thinking. Moving to the cloud can certainly be daunting, and there's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there. And at times, it can be hard to ground all of this buzz that's taking place. And there's a lot of questions that you might have on the early days. How is this relevant? How do I get started? There's a tremendous amount of technology again. What is the first thing you do? What do you what do you try? What do you need to change? And what are the challenges? How do you build a team? You certainly might have heard that it's very difficult to find people. And the other one is, how do you convince your leadership? Now, there's a number of drivers that companies tend to have. And by the way, in all of this is there's no cookie cutter approach. It all depends on your company, your context, your location, and so on. So what I'm discussing here is some of the overall patterns that we see. But certainly cultural is one of the drivers. Companies may want their culture to be more aligned with technology so that employees can utilize this learning to be able to implement strategy using technologies. Another one might be financial. There are certainly incentives and good market data that moving to the cloud will save you money. Another one's innovation related. The ecosystem of technologies that are available in the cloud would allow you to do things quicker, easier, with less expense than if you were to do it within your own environment. But few executives pursue technology for technology's sake. This is something that is best left to universities and other research environments. And one of the biggest that we see is speed and agility. You want to move faster, you want to be more flexible to respond to market changes, and in general, be more competitive. So if we think about these overall patterns that we see in many companies, four that you could point out, and depending on which literature you look at, these could be called differently. And we can certainly discuss whether these are the best ones, but these are good ones to put your arms around, is the project, a foundation, a migration, and a reinvention. If we consider the project, this is where you start. This is where you ground all of this buzz. This is where you make a decision and you commit to an implementation. It is also your exploration into the cloud environment. It's where you're learning about the cloud. It's where you're trying to choose an appropriate project so that you can get a wind and you can build on that and try to get some momentum within your organization. Like anything else, there is no magic. It takes time, it's difficult. You have to sell, you have to inspire, you have to get your company to trust that this is the right way to go. The second one is the foundation. You have made a deployment, you have created a project, the potential has been realized, your company is starting to believe that this is the way to go, and so you're starting to build some resources. One of those is a cloud center of excellence. And here's where you try to provide some functionality that can enable the rest of your company. Interestingly enough, many companies do not force anyone to adopt these best practices or these reference architectures. In fact, they try to make them attractive enough so that they have less pain than if they were to go about it alone. This is also a good place to capture some of those best practices. Again, try to enable, try to facilitate this, try to work with teams that are key teams within your organization so that if they have a win, it becomes more visible. The next stage after that is the stage of migration. Here is where you've built some foundations, you've had some wins, you've had some projects or some business units that have already successfully moved into the cloud. And so now you want to make a bigger commitment. You want to start to migrate your infrastructure to the cloud. And there's many models that we see here. Some of them are where you do not need to make any kind of business case. The company is just sold and it is just obvious to them that this is the way to go. And so you start to migrate. Another one, which is pretty common as well, is one where there needs to be a business case that is made. It is pretty easy, for example, to make the lowest lift and shift type of approach where you just move your infrastructure without any changes onto the cloud, because average savings there are quantified at about 30%. So that is one easy way to go. This is one easy way to justify, but you might require more in your organization. And certainly there's good business data for you to leverage there as well. And the last one is, now you're on the cloud, you have migrated the majority of your infrastructure, and now you're starting to look around and you're starting to look at the opportunities. Perhaps you can pull in some machine learning capabilities. Perhaps you can start to change some of your products to different licenses, for example, from a proprietary database to one that is open source, or a web server that is proprietary to one that is open source. Also to start to look at your business processes. Now that you are on the cloud and you have more agility and flexibility, perhaps you can start to do that. Not only that, you can start to capture your customer data in different ways. So there's a lot of opportunities once you reach stage 4. So the progression might look like this. And as I mentioned, there is no one formula for everybody. It might take different paths. As I note here, one destination and many roads. And some make initial commitments, right away, and make big push in the company and try to move everything onto the cloud. Very few companies do this. Even in the cases of very aggressive companies such as Netflix, it took them about 7 years to become cloud first, as is often said. And the other thing that should be said as well is there is no specific percentage of cloud that you need to be. You might always be 80% cloud, or you might always be 70% cloud, with the rest of it being on premises. It depends on your business environment, on your business case, and your infrastructure, and your business goals that you're trying to reach. Now, in general, when this transition is taking place, there are two organizational models. The first one, which is more common with startups and with digital companies, is one where you have loosely coupled organization and independently managed business units. There's a great degree of autonomy here. And the second one is more the centralized model, where central IT selects and controls and dictates everything that should be used. The centralized one has the efficiency and standardization of common resources backed by a team that is dedicated to support it, while the autonomous model can respond better to market changes and can be more innovative because they're looking very much at their own concerns as opposed to those of the entire company. Some mix there in between tends to be the best approach. As mentioned before, if you create a cloud center of excellence that provides some resources that the rest of the company can benefit from, and you do not force them. In fact, this should be a good indicator of whether the cloud center of excellence is doing a good job. If the company is adopting the technology without them being required, that means they are providing value. As I mentioned at the beginning, it can be daunting moving onto cloud, onto a new platform, and a new structure for your information technology. Some of these concepts and some of these mental models should help you in thinking about that transition, in thinking about those stages, in thinking about those options.